Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 92. What can paranormal tapes teach us about risk acceptance? So, ghost stories, ghost encounters, ghost activity, paranormal activity, things like that. It's interesting. In the year 2025, 1 in every 5 U.S. citizens believes they have encountered ghosts and directly encountered ghosts. This also kind of flows with about 1 in 20. No, it's 1 in 4 United States citizens believing in angels. So, there's that. But anyway, the whole concept of ghosts and paranormal activity, it has gone back to the beginning of time. There have been ghost stories since, early Roman days. Before that, even, we just have recordings from early Roman days. But there are a surprising number of ghost stories out there, and a lot of them are just simply anecdotal. Like, I saw this, I saw that, I experienced this, I experienced that. But there are a few that can really kind of stick in your craw just because of the amount of attention that was paid to them. And specifically, over the course of the 1800s, there were a ton of ghost stories, and a lot of that is because that was back in the days of cocaine and whiskey being prescribed as medical medication. And, there's just a whole bunch of stuff about, people wanting to take advantage of other folk. And, 1820s, that was the creation of circuses. And back when the bombastic world was really coming into its own. And so, there were a lot of ghost stories, and it's continued on. In basically, it got bigger and bigger and bigger every year until really about the 1920s, and then died off. And then again, right around 1980s, it started to explode again, which is really interesting. So, like, some examples, there's the Enfield poltergeist, which is a story that 2 girls in 1977, their names were Janet and Margaret Hodgson. They're in Enfield, London, and they believed that, or they said that they had been visited by ghosts. And when people investigated, they were able to see or hear the ghosts themselves. Like, this wasn't just something that they said and people believed. No, that they were able to actually experience the ghosts whistling and barking and knocking coming from the house. And it really does seem like, after everything is said and done, that this was legitimate, because the ghosts were actually interacting with people. They would respond. They would do things like that. Another really famous one is the Cock Lane Ghost, which is just an amazing title. But the Cock Lane Ghost, same thing. This ghost was in a house in London's Smithfield Market, and basically there was a bunch of scratching, moaning, knocking that occurred, and it would respond to people in the room. They believed it was the ghost of a person named Fanny and Cock. Oh my God, so many jokes. But anyway, the whole idea is that, there was witnesses, and people actually paid money to go and see this, like to talk to Fanny on Cock Lane. And it was a huge deal. But, there have been others. There's the Amityville ghost, and, a whole bunch of other ghost stories as well. But one of the most famous, and probably one of the most recently seen, and this one is actually a national story. And I remember when I was growing up as a kid, it came up on Unsolved Mysteries and a couple other shows, whichever one was pushed by Riker from Star Trek. This particular ghost story was different because they had evidence that they were able to show on television. And it seemed really compelling, which was amazing. And as growing up in the 80s and 90s, that is it was kind of crazy because like they had all these shows about paranormal activity, and a lot of them would just be stories, and maybe creepy ghost stories and creep you out, and they used creepy music to kind of push it. This was sort of the first one where you're like, holy shit, that's a ghost. Oh my God. And the specific circumstance that some of you might already know, I'm bearing in the lead here a little bit, might know what occurred here, or what I'm talking about. And that is these specific videos were all captured from Disney World and Disneyland, like Disney theme parks. And it seemed really spectacular because these were videotapes caught from security cameras that showed ghosts in the middle of the day, which was crazy. You could see these ghosts in the middle of the day. They were walking around. Seemingly nobody else saw them, but the camera captured them. And it would be everywhere, but most notably, where they would come from is like the Haunted Mansion, which, given its name, holy shit, like, oh my God, like, what was underneath that land? Was it, did they put it on a Native American burial ground? A side note, probably, considering the entire United States is buried on top of of the property of Native Americans, but that's a side note. Anyway, the whole point being that it was this nationally seen, nationally known broadcast, and you could see these people walking around, and they were ghostly. They had this ghost image, and other people would walk through them, seemingly unaware that they were even passing through these specters, and it was insane. Which kind of brings us to our other point with risk acceptance. So risk acceptance, I'm gonna hard shift gear, but risk acceptance in cybersecurity and IT is a concept where what we are looking at as far as threats and risk and the pose, how that poses our organization to a complete shutdown or complete takeover, a complete collapse. Risk acceptance is the measure of how much risk that a business can take or is willing to accept before they remediate or respond to or approach a problem. And so your organization should probably do some sort of calculation based on how much risk they're willing to accept. Now, some people will say, well, no level of risk is acceptable, and that is false. There is always an acceptance of risk. You accept risk by simply doing business. That is how that works. That's how business works. If you are a business owner and you say, I don't accept any risk, well, then how did you get into business to begin with? Where did your entrepreneurial spirit come into play to begin with? Because entrepreneurship, owning a business, that's all risk. Like anybody could sue you at any time, and that's risky. That's a risky proposition to own your own business. At any rate, the whole point being is that different organizations have different levels of risk acceptance. And your risk acceptance should probably be a reflection of how long your ability to respond to a threat or an outage or any sort of malicious impact is. And also how long your business could possibly be out of business or be shut down for a period of time. And this should sort of be a reflection from your business continuity plan and your disaster recovery plan. So your level of risk should basically be based off of the numbers that you have generated through your business continuity or disaster recovery plan. Now, that's not to say that that you need to make this huge calculation or have this very complicated math process. Really, the way that you calculate your risk and your risk acceptance is you create a risk heat sheet, like basically a 10 by 10 grid where you identify where your low risk, your medium risk, your high risk, and your critical risk levels will be at. And then you can put everything on that grid as far as where you would respond to events. So if something is a medium risk, that's probably something that you would approach, once, maybe a month, maybe a quarter, depending on how often you change things. High risk, that could be a week to a month. And then critical would be up to a week. You give yourself a week to respond to any critical outages. Now, that's just a basic outline of how different risk levels on the heat sheet would require a different response type. But in the end, what you're trying to do is you're trying to establish your acceptance of risk. Where are you willing to accept risk? Because effectively low, you're never going to respond to. If something is low risk, then it's not something that you're necessarily going to respond to. So when you are creating your risk acceptance guidelines, what you want to make sure you have in mind is not only how long it's going to take your business to recover from an outage, how long your business can remain solvent without doing any sort of business because of an outage, but also you're going to want to identify what types of risk you are willing to accept. And so there are different kinds of philosophies on this, and risk acceptance can be a dangerous topic because there are certain people who love risk. They love, they get a thrill out of it. And then, I don't know, it really seems kind of boring to be thrilled by, to get an adrenaline kick out of having business risk. Man, it's kind of a lame concept. But there are some people who think it's fun to have their business at risk. I don't get it. Anyway, and the concept here is that as you move across your business and you're creating risk and you're designing a security program or building your security program or implementing any sort of security program, you're identifying your risk levels so that you can report those out. Certain compliance frameworks require that you do some sort of risk assessment on your own business. Some of them require that you do an external risk assessment, but this is all, in effect, trying to do the same thing. It's trying to get you to understand where your risk lies, what your risk acceptance is, and how much work you need to do in order to get your risk to an acceptable level. Your current risk of disruption or current risk of malicious activity. So when you're doing this, you also have to look at it from a perspective where the risk is coming from, because certain sources of risk are more acceptable than others. So for instance, not every organization has the ability to have a man trap. Not every organization can have a security guard 24/7. Not every organization can have biometric locks on every door and, have cameras at every entrance and so on and so forth. Some businesses are small and some businesses can only remain open as public spaces because, hey, they're a hospital. They need to remain open. And so there are certain types of risk that those organizations can't avoid. And those can come in that way. I come in the form of physical approaches, as I was mentioning before, or they can come into things like digital. They can come in digital or programmatic approaches as well. And so, as an organization, not every organization is going to be able to protect themselves away from having port 443 open. Some websites, some companies need to have their website open. All the organizations need to, have they need to have an FTP port open on their external because they need to transfer files to and from. That's what their biller requires, whatever. Some risks are inherent to an organization, and it's just going to happen. And you have to know that. But through the process of laying out your risk and laying out your risk acceptance, you are going to basically marry where you can accept risk, where you have to accept risk, and what level of risk you can and have accepted. So, what the fuck does this have to do with paranormal tapes? Well, through or paranormal activity. Well, if you've been paying attention to all of these paranormal activities, all these ghost stories, all of any of these reports or TV shows or things like that, and you really get into it, all of them get debunked. Every single one. They all have been debunked. The Ghost of Cock Lane, Fanny of Cock Lane, that was debunked. It was the husband or the family that owned the house on Cock Lane. They were perpetrating it. Same thing with the Enfield poltergeist. All the same. It was the girls were part of the whole thing. They were generating the scratches, the noises, the moans. They were responding to people being in there. And even the Disney tapes, the Disney ghost tapes, those were fake as well. Because, and here's the benign explanation for those Disney tapes, is that as a business, you don't just buy new media for your videotapes. As your videotapes get used and you need to record another day because you have one day for every videotape, and you only keep a certain amount before you can throw away or get rid of those previous days. And so you recycle the videotapes and you start recording over them. Well, part of the problem with doing that is that the magnetic signature on your videotapes is imperfect, and when you record over it, there can be a ghosted image of the previous recording, which is what was happening. There were these ghostly images on these Disney security recordings, and that is what you were seeing. You were seeing this ghosted image from the previous recording of that particular tape. And it just so happened to be on the Haunted Mansion. It just so happened to be in other places. And it wasn't intentional, but it was something that somebody saw, decided to take advantage of, and make a national story out of. And this is kind of how risk acceptance can work when somebody is not willing to believe that their business can be put under threat by a specific circumstance. So, you can have these people, even though people see these ghost stories and they see them debunked, they hear about it. There's always other ones that they point at and say, oh, well, this one, but this one, and then this one, and then this one. And they say there's so much evidence to support ghosts being real. But when you get into those stories, when you get into that evidence, it's all anecdotal and it's all fake. Every single one of them have been fake and disproven. And if they haven't been disproven, it's only because they're not popular enough for them to be widely known. And so this is the same thing with people who accept certain levels of risk, because they believe they know better. They believe there's no way that they could be taken advantage of. And let me just say that is not true. As a business owner, as a business leader, you don't know better. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what will threaten you tomorrow. You don't know who will go after you tomorrow. You are not too small to be a target. You're just too small to be a headline. So these things are in reality where risk acceptance really becomes a problem, because certain people will accept higher levels of risk because they believe there's no way they can be targeted. The common saying in modern cybersecurity is that security by obscurity, meaning I'm too small to be hit. Security by obscurity is not security. And nobody is too small to be hit. Again, you're just too small to be a headline. If an attacker can get $5 from you without having to earn that $5, they will attack you for that $5. It's just how the world works. It's how attackers works. It's how malicious activity works. You are always going to be targeted by everybody. And small businesses are being targeted the same way as Fortune 500 companies. And so we have to respond accordingly. We have to have the proper tools and proper features, the proper postures to respond to and protect ourselves. So nobody is too small. The simple belief that you are protected because of your size or because of your character or because of whatever is false. It is not based in reality, much like people's belief in ghosts. Sorry to burst your bubble. I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I want to believe. That's all I got time for today, guys. Have a great day.